have a few panelists for the first theme, which is people and nature. And the first on is Caroline Kimani. Caroline is a carbon development consultant who dedicates her life, her time, and efforts into designing high-impact restoration projects, carbon investments, and community ownership. If we could give her a round of applause as she comes to the front. Next on is Esther Maina. Esther, with an environmental science background and 6+ years experience, Esther is experienced in environment, marine conservation, focused on plastic pollution, ecosystems restoration, blue economy, biodiversity policy, and advocacy. She has worked as an associate environment expert in private sector, as a consultant with International Training Center at the ILO, and also co-developed the youth-led ocean policies as a youth policy advisor with Sustainable Ocean Alliance. Esther is currently the country coordinator of the Kenyan Youth Biodiversity Network, where she provides strategic leadership and oversight on initiatives focusing on youth engagement in biodiversity conservation, policy, and advocacy. And she previously served as the organization's Marine Action Coordinator, and her works, of course, seek to inspire collaborative action that galvanizes integrated land-sea governance and coordinated protection of these ecosystems. Esther, let's appreciate her as she comes to the front. And next on is Bashir Ali Adan. I hope I pronounced that well. And Bashir is currently pursuing a BSc in agriculture at the University of Nairobi, and his specialization is in drylands resource management. And of course, he completed his last attachment under the Ministry of Agriculture, gaining hands-on experience across various government institutions. He's the founder of Eco Redemption, a youth-led initiative focused on climate resilience and sustainable livelihoods, which reached the university finals at the Health Prize competition in February this year. He's trained in data analytics for agriculture and has hands-on experience in hay farming, soil assessment, and agribusiness innovation. Passionate about food security, sustainability, and empowering youth and marginalized communities in Kenya through capacity building and design thinking. And I will start with you, Caroline. Recognizing that today is Earth Day, how do we continue protecting our vital ecosystems? How are you incorporating meaningful community engagement in carbon development and restoration to support livelihoods? In about 5 to 7 minutes, please.
Just a little bit of context. I work in the carbon development sector, as Kaluki mentioned, and I support organizations, and some of which are also community organizations, to develop carbon projects, which, when registered and monitored, issue carbon credits, which I suppose most people in the room have already heard about. And carbon credits really, as you know, are a market system to drive investment into climate change initiatives. And so this could be from NBS projects to energy initiatives, and to carbon dioxide removal technologies. And so they have become a key instrument to enable restoration activities across the globe, to enable also preservation of already existing ecosystems. And how this works is that they are really results-based mechanisms. And so whichever players, communities, government, private organizations can be able to drive these initiatives. And when there are results of emission reductions or carbon removals, then they're able to sell credits, and therefore there's finance coming into ecosystem restoration in that way. And I think carbon markets will still be here to enable, at least as an instrument, to come in against emission reductions or the emissions that are already going into the atmosphere. And they are, especially in NBS is nature-based solutions, there's a heavy involvement of communities, and therefore how community development can be driven through carbon projects is that they are key stakeholders. They are beneficiaries to projects, but also partners to projects, and therefore they drive the day-to-day operations of carbon projects, whether that looks like tree planting, whether that looks like protecting forests, protecting mangroves, and so on. And therefore, they are not only at the forefront, but also their livelihoods are also improved through such initiatives.
No, yeah, definitely. It's a tough, tricky question. And I know when you talk about carbon markets and the perspective of communities, especially, it becomes even more complicated. And noting that not so many people, especially from the corporate sector, really have the best interest in the communities, and really such perspectives from people like you intentionally planning with communities are very important, because without the community we are nothing, and no matter the solutions we bring forth, we cannot do so much if we are not leading with our community. So thank you for that. And now, Esther, I'll come to you, and feel free to also maybe jump on Esther's point, Caroline's point. But of course, as a marine biologist and a scientist working with communities and being keen on the coastal leadership in ocean governance, how do you see the relationship between human beings and nature at present? Do you see it as a healthy one? Is it deteriorating? And what can we do to salvage it?
Thank you so much, Paul. And I'm happy to be here. And today is a special day, not just to celebrate Earth Day, but also renew our promise to protect the planet, and also a commitment to continue raising awareness on these pressing environmental challenges. Thank you so much for that question. It depends, first of all, with how we view the planet. That is what I think. And I think from a biocentric point of view, and that is the one that upholds that every being on Earth has equal moral standing, and that is what helps us to envision or see the Earth as something to be safeguarded, something to be protected, and to be able to make sure that we cannot be in a position of dominance as human beings. We are both equal. The planet does not belong to anyone. We are part of it. And our human right to live emanates from the existence of a planet, and not just a planet, but the existence of a healthy planet. There was the previous eras when people thought that our actions could not impact the planet. I've heard some people say, like, the ocean is too big to be impacted by things that we do. But looking at how things are right now, we can already see the imbalance that human activities have caused on our planet. And looking forward is the fact that we are reaping from our own actions. I love talking about the ocean because some of these conversations are really marginalized in these discussions that we normally have. And we were talking about by the year 2050, we could have more plastic than fish in the ocean. But right now, we're already fishing plastic. And one of the books that I love the most is known as Deriving by Gaia. And this is a book that personifies the planet and also communicates in a way that shows the Earth could also revenge, and the repercussions that we are having on the repercussions that this is having is that we are reaping from our own actions. And looking forward, I think Faluki alluded to how we can redefine this. And I think this goes beyond. I love the fact that we are talking about restoration journeys today. And I think when we talk about restoration, it's not just a matter of ecological restoration, but also a matter of fundamental shifts in our values. We are talking about things to do with climate injustices, things to do with inequalities, things to do with how you've been treating each other and also the planet. And so rethinking these values and seeing how we can move from that dominance to enhance coexistence and harmonious coexistence with nature. I come from a biodiversity youth network, and the long-term strategic vision is that of living in harmony with nature. So how do we live in harmony with nature if we cannot live in harmony with ourselves? So we really need to, I love how my colleague highlighted about making communities at the center of the works that we do, making sure that their contributions can also count in our initiatives, because in terms of science, not just the modern science is important, but also the contributions that come from indigenous people, local communities, and also communities at the front lines of addressing the triple planetary crisis.
It's a very good points that you're putting forward on the fact that Mother Nature is bleeding, and as she bleeds, we bleed as well, and we are reaping fruits of our own actions, but we still have time to actually remedy and go back to the basics of nature. Thank you for that reflections. And Bashir, coming to you and the youngest on the panel, first, congratulate you as a student. Really amazing works that you're doing at Eco Redemption. I first want you to tell us more about Eco Redemption and the kind of activities that you are doing at the grassroots. And then, with your agriculture expertise and experience, what gaps are you seeing and opportunities are you seeing in especially regenerative agriculture to transform food systems, especially in Kenya, from your insights in school and through your organizations at the grassroots level?
Thank you so much for having me here today. As you have heard, my name is Bashir Ali Adam, a student from the University of Nairobi. To touch a little bit on Eco Redemption, Eco Redemption is a community-driven project, and the initiative itself works on, restoring our ecosystem. And by restoring, what I mean is driving land degradation and the effects of climate change backwards. As Paul have said, it's that the earth is bleeding at the moment, and we are suffering for that. What we at Eco Redemption are trying to do is that whatever effects that we're having at the moment, can we drive those effects backwards? So we have an interconnectedness of crises that are happening at the moment: climate change, land degradation, biodiversity loss. So when I say is that climate change, as we all know, climate change simply is erratic rainfalls, the El Nino rainfalls, and prolonged droughts, just to define it simply. So climate change, what it does is that it leads to land degradation. What land degradation does is that it leads to biodiversity loss. And then we go back the same way. When you don't have biodiversity, or we don't have a healthy ecosystem, there is land degradation. When you have land degradation, we have climatic change. The effect is worsening. So at Eco Redemption, what we are doing is that we are restoring land. This restoration is bringing about ecosystem health, at the same time livelihood diversification. When I say is that we're not just planting trees. When you hear about restoration of land, what comes into mind is that planting trees, doing something for the ecosystem. What we're trying to do is that restore the ecosystem as well as provide food. When you're telling this pastoralist, when you're telling this farmer to plant tree, is he gaining from it? Okay, what kind of trees is he planting? For example, the main problem that we have in implementing such kind of projects at the moment is the ideological challenge, and whereby when you go and connect with the pastoralist, that you have such kind of a problem. You have degraded the land, there is no ecosystem health, there will be adverse climatic effects, climatic shocks in the future. Plant trees. The first question that we'll ask you is that, will planting trees bring me food to the table? So you just can't go to the pastoralists or these dryland communities and tell them about restoring the land. You have to come with practices that, restore the land, bring ecosystem health, as well as put food on their table. And when I say food, It's not just about getting something to eat indirectly, maybe. Can he get something that he can sell at the market so that he can get money to buy food? So in terms of doing this from my agricultural experience, the types of practices that I have seen work, and from the various projects that I have done in my 4 years at the university, I think the top one is doing agroecological practices. What agroecological practices mean is that you take ecological principles and then you take that to the community. The community has indigenous knowledge. You combine that. Simply, the agroecological principles that are there today is agroforestry. There is this whereby when you go to dryland communities, for example, you use a method such as agri-silvopastorist. In the same house, you integrate something such as agriculture, water production, beekeeping, and livestock. So when rain doesn't come our way, when we have that prolonged drought, this person will not be depending on the crops. This person will rather be depending on fees that are the beekeeping, the enterprise, and this fodder production. So this drought, this no drought, keep their livestock, but I'm producing fodder. I have fodder banks. So I think personally for me, agroecological principles top that list. And then there's water harvesting. The major problem affecting the dryland communities or the ASAL regions in Kenya, and by the way, 60% of Kenya's land falls under irrigated land. So what happens is that we have a lot of degraded lands. We have a lot of ASAL regions, but there are less efforts being done in those areas. Okay, so what more can we do? What more can we put? And the main problem here is not about soil fertility. Somebody will think, why agriculture? Why trying to practice something such as crops and all that? Why agriculture? The main problem is what the land on this road. So what on list? What kind of harvesting techniques can we do, or can we take to this community so that it can help them? For example, the doing of the live pits and the contour farms, and also the half moons. These things, somebody thinks harvesting water is like bringing tanks, construction of dams and all that. No, just something as simple as digging the land, creating a half moon, so that when it rains, it prevents that water runoff. You see? So I think for me, that's one of the things that we can do to drive these three things together. And then for the gaps and the opportunity in regenerative farming, the gaps I think at the moment is knowledge and skill. These things are performed in the rural areas. It's not performed here in town. The people that have the skill are here in town, not in the local area. So how can we take this skill to from the people that have it to the people that don't have it? And then the other thing about regenerative farming is about eco-conscious. Whatever is produced in regenerative farming is not about using of fertilizers and all that. Use something organic farming, you minimize stealing and all that. So what can we do? Another gap is that the market for goods that are produced eco-consciously. So we need to have that originality and certification, whereby, for example, when you go to the market, that this banana or this tomato has been produced this way. Okay, I think for the opportunities that will provide a lot of room to grow their market in terms of getting market to the people that are producing such space.
Thank you, Bashir, and really appreciating the case studies and examples that you've given around zai pits, fodder farming, the opportunities to even tap into water. Times I know these are the places when drought hits, it hits seriously, but when it rains, it floods, and we've had cases of livestock, dying, properties being lost, and livelihoods also being lost to flooding effects and all that. And I definitely agree with you on the opportunities how we can transfer the skills and learn together. I don't think the issue is capacity building at the community level. The issue is capacity enhancement, because they also have their capacities, and you rightfully put it so that there's a way we can merge between people in the city, people in the grassroots, to really bring about these opportunities around generative agriculture. Now, I'm pressed for time, or rather we are pressed for time on this panel, but I don't want to let you go before we maybe gauge the room. Are there any insights that have come out of this conversation you want to respond to? Are there any questions you want to throw to any of the panelists? Are there any case studies that you've been leading on that you believe fit in on this panel and you'd like to share with us? This would be your opportunity.
Actually, mine is just an observation. And I agree with Bashir that the community is very important. However, I don't think, as much as we think that the smart people are in the cities, I think that I disagree a little bit there. Because in my travels, especially in the countryside, I find, like you, maybe you might have come from a particular part of the country. You've seen the effects of climate change firsthand. And then you've come to the city, maybe you've gotten your education in a big city. For someone like yourself, yes, absolutely. You're an expert and you can bring incredible change. However, actually, I think the smartest people are those in the countryside. They've been there for hundreds of years, for generations. Yes, the government needs to come in. They need, they're taxpayers in any case. So the government needs to chip in, or organizations such as, the ones that you represent needs to chip in because you're educated. But it's important to get the knowledge that they have also there. Yes, we might look down upon them, but in most cases we do. That, people in the countrysides, they might lack knowledge or how to, big change like people who are educated like us. But it's the small that they've been, the practices that they've had over the years in those parts of the country, we can say, right, and amplify it, right? I agree with you that it's, the people in the community is very important. That we should maximize that be present in those areas for generations. I don't know if I'm making sense.
I agree with you, and community always has the resilience and the wisdom that they can exchange across the centuries. That's pure, and I think that is why, from Bashir's experience, how they even able to work around this ecological principle, how they're able to even implement the ZIPIT systems to grow their crops, and even telling how ecosystem change, why they change. So for us, we really have to qualify that as wisdom. So I agree with you as well, and seeing the opportunity that communities bring on the table. We have another contribution from the audience.
I'm Catherine. My concern is about a carbon market. As a grassroots woman, I would love to know the linkages you have to carbon market. Another thing I would love to know is, do you have the names of the carbon companies that can be helpful to the grassroots woman? Also, I would love to know, do you offer trainings on emissions, sequestrations that can help the grassroots women?
What activities? The restoration. Okay. So, yeah, there are a couple of companies that you would call carbon developers. And what carbon developers do is that they support organizations be able to access carbon finance. And one way they come in to do that is through technical support, because carbon projects can be very technical in terms of how you design the project, how you register the project, how you get it monitored, and how you carry that on through the lifetime of the project, usually like 40 plus years. So one is technical support, and the other is accessing finance through various avenues, whether it's investment or pre-selling the credits and so on, and getting access to buyers, marketing your credits and so on. And there are a couple of them. I, for example, work with one called Africa Carbon Partners, and there are so many others. Happy to engage with you for for at least or so. And usually there are a couple of questions they might ask you to determine, because this is it's a market mechanism. So most of these carbon developers, if not all, are profit-making companies, and so it has to make economic sense. And therefore, they would ask you, what's the scale of your project? What type of species are you planting? What kind of restoration are you doing? Is it land-based? Is it mangrove? And yeah, who owns the land? Is it community? Are you leasing land? Are you working on public land? And those will affect really how, different developers also have different models, but that will affect how they perceive the project. And usually because the transaction costs that come with carbon projects are quite high, so that means you need a particular skill in order to offset those costs and still be able to make profit that will flow across all the players within that project. And on your side, before you engage those developers, you should probably also have questions in terms of, some kind of due diligence, because as you would know, carbon markets have had a good share of integrity issues. So you also want to understand what kind of developer you're working, what their model is, what kind of benefit mechanisms they have with communities, and whether communities are actually gaining from that. So yeah, in a nutshell, that would be it. In terms of restoration, that could be many things, from agroforestry to actual afforestation, deforestation, to mangrove restoration, to things to do with the ocean. So that would also determine how you credit your project and how much carbon benefit your project can bring. Yeah.
Hope you answered, and I believe Carol will be here for almost the whole duration of our programming today. So let us have these conversations offline, because I believe that's a very important area that needs all the scrutiny and understanding, so that we have the community rights respected, justice for the lands are respected, and also, the good profit sharing between the community and the developers and the, projects, companies that are coming to the grassroots. Do you have one last?
How practical is it for grassroots, or rather women-led grassroots organizations, to benefit from carbon projects? Because as it is, based on what I know, is that they have to fall within certain sectors for you to be able to be support, or rather to apply for example, carbon finance. And it's such a tedious process, and it's very, very, I feel like it's very complicated, and it attracts a lot of money, like in terms of investing in these projects. So in terms of Kenya, how practical has it been for this for these grassroots organizations to actually attract carbon finance?
Yeah, that's a good question. So usually why, and you mentioned it, why grassroots organizations are not able to directly link to these markets. And I hope this changes with time, because it's also not always interesting to see. But this is really the case with a lot of markets. It's their technical knowledge. They're complex, their methodologies. How do you quantify that an agroforestry project is actually removing carbon emissions, and you're going through loads of documents just to account for that, loads of spreadsheets that just to account for that, and they need to be audited, and communities cannot do that. And so, and then another reason is the scale. So you find that grassroots organizations are probably acting on just a couple of hundreds of acres, And so what developers do is they aggregate different grassroots organizations, and then that meets the skill requirements. Then they can register a whole program involving different organizations. So it indeed is complicated, and it's honestly it's not getting any less complicated, because there are more and more requirements for integrity, and therefore that comes with extra layers of, okay, now we need regulations, for example, and Kenya just passed the regulations last year, and there are more drafts already out, and so that also brings in another layer of integrity, but also complexity. So, and there are others. There's an integrity council that just came up, just to make sure that this, if, for example, Microsoft says they have removed XX CO2 from the atmosphere, that indeed it is credible, and therefore that has come with a lot of complications. So it is practical, but it does take time, and that could be years sometimes, especially for nature-based projects, before you ever get your project registered, and even more years before you ever issue credits. So, and there are so many projects in Kenya, from agroforestry projects to rangeland projects to, this is just within the restoration aspect, to restoring degraded lands, like restoring land-based forest, restoring mangroves. There's also some coming up on just restoring the fauna, the flora in the marine ecosystems. And each of those have, I mean, overall the processes are the same, but how you account for the carbon is different. And they are costly, again, because if you just look at the economics of getting a restoration project going, and you guys know it's quite expensive. Yeah, getting the right seeds, getting the right species in the ground, protecting those trees, especially if they're indigenous, it's quite expensive. And then now scale these to thousands of acres to hectares, and it becomes quite capital intensive. And then if you add the layer of, we are working with either different farmers or different communities, we are working across hundreds of thousands of rangeland, and that does come with so many other costs. So there is a lot of money going into carbon projects, but there's also a lot of money just being drained in costs. And what sometimes people see is projects that have been credited for so many years, and what you see is a bulk sale, and millions of dollars come out of that. So there is a lot of money through sales. Of course, if you restore like 100,000 hectares of forest, rangeland, and whatever, then you sell this after 5 years. You're looking at quite a lump sum. It's also very costly, but there's also the other side that there's also transparency that's required to understand how this money is being shared across stakeholders and how much is eventually trickling down to communities. And that is one place that has triggered all these integrity requirements, that indeed if we say that we have removed a ton of CO2 from the atmosphere, and we have shared 50% with communities, that indeed that is what actual and is on the ground. So I'm not sure I've answered that, but I hope it answers the practicality question and the amount of investment that goes into carbon projects.
But for the panel, first, to appreciate you for the amazing interventions, reflections, and also share lived experiences. I don't want to let you go before you quickly just submit your closing statement from what you've heard from your fellow panelists. How are things? Are you still celebrating your restoration journey? And what more can you do to make a better world?
in about less than a minute. Sorry.
Well, mine is just to go more from books to practicality. I think we do it in a world whereby we do more theory rather than practicality. So let us go to these places where these efforts are needed and do what's needed rather than, just me being more of talks and saying, rather than right now we have ideas, all of us are experienced people in the field. So rather than just having that knowledge, what can you do with it? I think that's the main thing. And I have said capacity building and enhancement being one of the major things to do. So I think big up on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to celebrate everybody as well. And my parting shot would be, let us not grow weary in doing the good things that we are doing. It is normal to feel overwhelmed sometimes, but it is also good to come together and learn from each other. Each and every new day we are having innovative ways of protecting our planet. And I love the fact that we are deconstructing how some of these approaches have been used before, like using media, bringing us together here to amplify our voices and ensuring that we can enhance that collective effort that we have as a people. There is power that lies in civil society, and it is the power that helps us to drive that transformative change. And so let us continue doing the good thing that we are doing.
Yeah, I would just emphasize what my friends have said, that at the end of the day we should not lose the North Star, and that is climate action. So whether we're engaging in carbon projects, what really matters is what action is happening on the ground, and that climate action is actually happening because climate change is a result of very small and big, but very small actions that have led us here, and it is the small actions also that we require. So indeed, we should not get tired of it.
And for sure, we are connected to nature, and without nature, we are nothing. We need to mend our relationship with her, and we need to see the place of communities in enhancing the resilience that these communities have been working around to ensure, but also in safeguarding the interests of nature. To appreciate our panelists, we have a small gift for them. I just hope that you can unpack it and then you take a group photo with you. Let's appreciate them.